Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reckless Paradise podcast. I am your host, Dystro, and tonight's episode is, well, it's not to shoot the shit, it's this Sunday that will be coming up. But tonight's episode is my choice. Now, I was thinking long and hard on this, and I hadn't done a what if in a little bit. Um, there has been plenty of what if scenarios that we'll get to in later dates here on this channel, but I think to kind of kick things off in the right way, um, talking about the Deadlock Boys, talking about what they had just went through, talking about the Raw from 1999. And it's when Vince McMahon reveals himself to be the higher power and leads into that King of the Ring that year. Well, what if the higher power wasn't Vince McMahon in the WWE? Now, it's no secret that this higher power storyline bullcrap was 3 months too long, and it kind of just didn't really have the legs to stand on a little bit. Because this was when Undertaker had formed the Ministry of Darkness and all stuff. And then you had the corporation with Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon and Triple H and all that stuff. And then it kind of merged into this big, huge power stable. You had Undertaker, you had Shane McMahon, you had Vince McMahon, you had Triple H, you had Acolyte, which was Bradshaw and Farouk, you had Big Boss Man, you had Viscera, you had Midian, you had all these other people in one stable, and some of those people didn't really need to be there. I feel like it was just one of those ways to have people on the roster that can take a fall in a tag match or something else. Because Undertaker goes on to be WWF champion, Triple H becomes WWF champion, Shane McMahon becomes European champion and Hardcore champion. Viscera becomes Hardcore champion a little bit. Midian becomes European champion, but it was just because Shane McMahon just goes, "Oh yeah, here, just take the belt, and I don't care about it anymore." Um, Acolytes become tag champions in that stable. Um, but, I think with Vince McMahon revealing himself to be the higher power, it's just a prolonged thing to have in the storyline with between him and Steve Austin. A lot of people were speculating that it could be somebody else within uh outside the WWE sphere. Um, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But in the Real Attitude Era, the higher power storyline culminated in Vince McMahon revealing himself to be the dark mastermind behind the corporate ministry, a faction led by Undertaker. However, in an alternate timeline, the reveal could have been somebody else, and that might have changed the angle's impact. So, it says why the original reveal felt off. The higher power angle began when Undertaker formed the Ministry of Darkness, kidnapping Stephanie McMahon and preparing her for a ritual sacrifice. Vince McMahon eventually intervened with the help of Stone Cold, but by the time he revealed himself, the feud had cooled, the storyline fizzled. Jim Ross later revealed that, or later confirmed, that the original plan was to reveal a younger, less known star as the higher power, but not Vince McMahon. Now, there was a lot of people that could have been in that role. There was a lot of people speculating that it could have been somebody outside of the WWE sphere, like I said. Um, But I think the first one I'm going to read could have been the best choice for the higher power. It could have been Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, it could have played into what he had done in the past, because like he put over Stone Cold Steve Austin in the King of the Ring, leading up to the King of the Ring that year, because it was 1996 when that happened. And if Jake had just kind of kept himself clean, I think he was kind of getting clean around that point. Um, but like I think that would have been a good like shoehorn in person to be the higher power. Because Jake's a good promo. He can lead the crowd into a frenzy, and plus nobody would have expected it. Because he was a fan favorite in back in the day when he was in the WWF. Because he also had a cult following, and could have added a more personal, fan-driven twist to the angle as well. Some people had speculated that it was Ted DiBiase Sr., the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase, because he was the original person that brought Undertaker into the company. DiBiase could have framed the ministry as a corporate takeover, tying into his history with Austin and the corporation. That would have been cool. Talking about Jake the Snake again, but another person that could have been in that picture could have been Christopher Daniels, the fallen angel Christopher Daniels. Now, this is way before he becomes ROH person and tag team guy and all that stuff. He was still young into his career, and plus they were both popular in the late '90s indie scene a little bit, and could have brought a grittier, more hardcore tone to the ministry's ideology back then too. Some people were speculating that it could have been Hulk Hogan or Eric Bischoff, because if the ministry had ties to WCW, a reveal of a rival company executive could have escalated the feud to a cross-promotional war, which that would have been cool. Not gonna lie, it would have been awesome to see that. But, it is what it is, Um, so there could have been more possible or potential outcomes for a different reveal. More fan investment, because a lesser known or fan favorite name could have kept the storyline alive a lot longer. Um, like I said about Jake the Snake Roberts or Christopher Daniels, it would have been cool to see, especially if it was Jake, like leading the crowd into a frenzy. Like I said, it could have driven more buzz in that time, because Jake the Snake was not on WWE TV for I would say since like mid '90s, maybe early '90s. And bringing him back into the company would have been cool. Because I could have mentioned like, it was me, Austin. It was me all along, Austin. Like it would have been mwah, chef's kiss. It would have been so good. And plus, play up the fact that Jake got beat by Steve Austin in '96, and kind of been like, like that day it didn't resonate with me. Like it could have just been more, I guess, story driven. Let's just say that. Different faction dynamics too. Like a corporate villain like DiBiase or a rival company figure could have shifted the ministry's goal from internal control to a border or broader industry war. Again, that'd be kind of cool, because DiBiase was the first person that brought the Undertaker into the company when he first debuted, and just kind of kept him like in a I'm not gonna try to say like a transmetic state. But this is way before Paul Bearer became a thing with Undertaker. But the tie-in between DiBiase and Taker was there. Could have been a cooler thing, but just never happened. A stronger Undertaker versus rival feud. If the higher power was a direct competitor, example Hogan, the Ministry could have been portrayed as a threat to the entire wrestling business, not just WWE. Um, like I said, a WCW figure like Hogan or Eric Bischoff, it could have led to a cross promotional war between WWF and WCW. Which I don't know how that would have played out, to be honest with you, because there's going to be a lot of politics behind the scenes back then. Because like Hogan, Nash, Hall, uh, Shawn, Austin, like all these people that were huge politicians back then could have just been like, no, I'm not going to lose to him. No, I don't want to lose to her. Like whatever. And I don't think it would have worked out as well. Um, I think back then too, like they still had the light heavyweight division. I think. Um, I would have loved to see Taka Michinoku versus Rey Mysterio at that time. Because I think that would have been a crazy match, crazy matchup. Um, and plus, I think around that time too, I think WCW was starting to introduce a hardcore division. I think, um, but I really don't know if that was gonna be like a thing. Um, but yeah, it just to me it feels like it's just more kind of a what if, another what if down the line. And plus also more lasting legacy. A memorable reveal could have been cemented, or could have cemented the Ministry as one of the most iconic factions in WWE history, rather than fading into obscurity. That is also true. It just feels like to me that the Ministry of Darkness was like a flash in the pan sort of faction. It still kind of had some star power in it. It had it had Taker leading his whole group, like his own group, and then you have the corporate ministry. You have you have Shane, Vince, Triple H, and also so you have some more people on it, but then you have lower mid carders, maybe jobbers on that stable, and not a lot of people's gonna be buying into people that are gonna lose every single time. I mean, we still got we had gotten some Ed and Christian out of it. We had gotten Viscera out of it because some of those people were still in the WWE to that day, until they left, of course. But I think it would have been cool just to see what could have happened in that if nothing had went the way it was. But in short, if Vince McMahon hadn't been the higher power, the angle could have been more surprising, more thematically rich, and potentially, oh, excuse me, and potentially more memorable. But it would have required a reveal that fits the ministry's dark cult-like image while still being a credible threat to WWE's leadership. Um, which I still think that's a true statement. Um, but it's had some controversial storylines over its long history. Let's just be honest with this. But I am going to be reading more of an article here about how it is more explained a little bit. So it says the most lasting meme involves Vince McMahon's mechanical face, as he reveals it was him all along. However, in hindsight, the angle's reveal doesn't make much sense, It started with Undertaker wanting to form an evil faction, which eventually feuded with the corporation, a faction beholden to the WWE's biggest bosses. Eventually, it turned into a more controversial moment when the corporate ministry kidnapped Stephanie McMahon and prepared her for a ritual sacrifice. McMahon found help from his former enemy, Steve Austin, and the war continued. However, by the time Vince revealed he was the higher power, things wound down quickly and the storyline died. So, this was a little footnote here, I guess by one of the writers on this article. It says the higher power is not one of the better payoffs to any angle in WWE history. The idea of Mr. McMahon being in charge wasn't even what was supposed to happen, but the storyline was in progress. It wasn't until it was almost time to make the reveal that McMahon chose to make it himself the man under the hood, which made no sense based on the actions leading up to it. True. Jim Ross confirmed the long-established rumors in 2024 that the higher power was supposed to elevate a younger star who had yet to make his mark in WWE. Instead, it ended up as a meme for Mr. McMahon. Yeah, like, kind of just like a dust in the wind sort of thing. Talking about, this is like when it broke down the whole thing here. So this is like when, excuse me, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. Undertaker formed the Ministry of Darkness. So this is like October of 99 or 98 at Bad Blood. Paul Bearer turns on Kane and rejoins Undertaker. The next night on Raw, Undertaker announces he is forming the Ministry of Darkness. And then, in November of 98, the Acolytes made their debut, which is Bradshaw and Farouk. In December of 98, the Ministry abducts Dennis Knight and turns him into Midian. And then July 25th, 99, the Ministry abducts Mabel and turns him into Viscera. And then February 1st, 99, the Brood joins the Ministry of Darkness. So, the angle officially started in 98 after Bad Blood, when Paul Bearer turned on Kane and rejoined The Undertaker. The next night on Raw, Undertaker finalized his heel turn and said that he was starting the Ministry of Darkness, a new faction emphasizing Undertaker's darker aspects. He promised a plague of evil for the WWE and entered a feud with both Stone Cold and The Rock with the WWE title as the prize. He began to evolve things like rituals and sacrifices in his gimmick. He also signed on some of WWE's scariest wrestlers as almost a dark satanic cult. The original members included names like Bradshaw, Farouk, Midian, Viscera, and the Brood, which was Gangrel, Edge, and Christian. Undertaker abducted most of the members and seemingly brainwashed and transformed them into evil beings before they remained with him and helped spread his evil. And then this is when they started to feud with the corporation on February 19th of 99. The Ministry of Darkness began a feud with Vince McMahon and his corporation. It was uncertain, or it was a unusual faction versus faction feud between two heel groups. The feud began when Mr. McMahon said that Undertaker had gone too far and was living his gimmick. McMahon actually broke kayfabe here and called Undertaker by his real name to make it seem like the dead man was out of control and presented a real danger to WWE superstars and its fans. Which, to be fair, calling your own person, Mark Calloway, Undertaker, I think that's actually a kind of a crazy kayfabe break there. But, whatever. McMahon forced Undertaker to battle Kane, part of the corporation, in an Inferno match to make a point of it next week on Raw's War. However, that match led to the start of what would become the higher power storyline when Undertaker won and then showed McMahon that their war was very personal. Of course, this is the infamous Undertaker lights Stephanie's childhood teddy bear on fire. um, McMahon was sitting ringside watching the Kane vs. Undertaker Inferno match on Raw. However, midway, oh God, I'm so sorry. Midway through the bout, Paul Bearer showed up with a package he delivered to Mr. McMahon. The match itself ended with Undertaker beat Kane by setting his leg on fire. It just reminds me of all the Kane thing, like, if I don't win this match, I will set myself on fire. Like, it just reminds me of that. And then McMahon opened the package to find a teddy bear in it. This caused McMahon to react emotionally. He began breaking down. Undertaker took the bear and lit it on fire as McMahon broke into tears. It was a teddy bear that belonged to his daughter Stephanie as a child. This is where Undertaker took things and made it very personal between Tim and McMahon. And this would lead to one of the most controversial moments in the entire Ministry versus Corporation war. Of course, this is also leading to the burning the symbol on McMahon's lawn. At WrestleMania 15, Undertaker hangs Big Boss Man in the Hell in a Cell after their steel cage match, or their Hell in a Cell match. And then Taker kidnaps Stephanie after he beats Shamrock at Backlash. Also leads to the infamous moments like, "Where to, Stephanie?" Like, it leads to that moment. It's like, it's so iconic for all the wrong reasons, but it's also so iconic for all the right reasons. This led to another moment that became a meme years later. Undertaker said that he answered to a greater power that holds the key to McMahon's soul, or heart and soul. They burned a giant crucifix shaped like in McMahon's front lawn at his home. Undertaker started sacrificing more people to his dark cause, and then also sacrificed Ryan Shamrock, which was Ken Shamrock's girlfriend at the time. Make that make sense. But this led to the match at Backlash in '99 between Taker and Ken Shamrock. And then gets until and Vince McMahon tells Stephanie to get into the limo and leave, and it leads to the all-time classic moments like, "Where to, Stephanie?" It just leads to that whole moment, and just it's so crazy. So then we go into April 26, 99. Undertaker tries to sacrifice Stephanie McMahon, but Stone Cold saves her. And then, 3 days later, we go to the very first SmackDown ever, which Shane McMahon joins forces with Undertaker to form the corporate ministry. Vince McMahon tried everything he could to stop The Undertaker when this turned personal. He sent his own men in the corporation after him in Ken Shamrock, Big Boss Man, and Big Show. Undertaker hung Boss Man at WrestleMania, beat Shamrock at Backlash, and even stopped Big Show. There seemed to be only one person that McMahon could turn to, and it showed the WWE Universe Mr. McMahon asked Stone Cold Steve Austin to help him. When Undertaker tried to force Stephanie to marry him in a ritual sacrifice, the Black Wedding, it was Stone Cold who saved Mr. McMahon's daughter. This exact moment caused Shane McMahon to undertake a hostile takeover of the corporation on the very first WWE SmackDown in history. He joined forces with Undertaker to form the corporate ministry. This completed Mr. McMahon's babyface turn and made Shane McMahon one of the most hated members of the WWE roster. And then we get to the infamous moment, like I was talking about. June 7th, 1999, the Deadlock Boys have talked about this on their podcast and all this stuff. Talking about Vince McMahon being the higher power. And then at King of the Ring that year, in '99, Mr. McMahon and Shane McMahon beat Stone Cold to win the control of the entire company, because in kayfabe, uh, Vince and Shane were gonna do a 50 versus 50%, for the whole enchilada, thing, in a no holds barred match. Well, which that didn't happen. Vince reveals himself as the higher power, talking about the, like being like, um, like, I didn't mean to hurt you, Stephanie. I didn't mean to hurt you, Linda, and all that stuff. And then, you know, it leads to him just being a complete dickhead and douchebag. Um, which leads to, I would say it's an all time classic match in my own mind, because it's just Steve Austin beating the shit out of Vince and Shane for, I'd say, 15, 20 minutes. In a ladder match, no less. In a ladder match, no less, for the whole enchilada. Um, and then in July of '99 at Fully Loaded, Stone Cold beat Undertaker and the corporate ministry dissolved. Now, let's just read more into this. The corporate ministry finally said that they would reveal who the higher power was. This was somebody that Undertaker had been taking orders from since the start and pulled all the strings of the entire faction. Well, things went off the rails at this point. Mr. McMahon said it was him. It was me all along, Austin. Oh, son of a bitch, and that he did this because he wanted to get the title off of Stone Cold. But when the Ministry of Darkness started talking about the higher power, The Rock was the champion, and he was with McMahon. It made no sense. Of course it did. Immediately after immediately after Mr. McMahon revealed he was the higher power, Stephanie came out and asked why her dad did this to her. Vince seemed sad at first, but then Linda Linda came out and said that they sold their shares of WWE and transferred their 50% of the power to Stone Cold Steve Austin earlier that day. If no one knew McMahon was the higher power, why did they make this move before the reveal? It was another hint that this was not thoroughly thought out. No shit. Just 2 weeks after Stone Cold was given 50% power in WWE, he lost it in a match to Mr. McMahon and Shane McMahon. Soon, the entire corporate ministry dissolved, and Undertaker moved on to team with The Big Show, while Mr. McMahon and Austin continued their feud. Austin finally won the WWE Championship back. Undertaker quit the group rather than following McMahon's orders, and the entire higher power angle ended. Now, another part of this, like I was saying about between Jake the Snake Roberts, Ted DiBiase, and Christopher Daniels. Christopher Daniels was supposed to be the higher power. And this is what, and plus Bruce Pritchard had confirmed the rumors about it too. There have been rumors for a long time that the higher power was supposed to be Christopher Daniels. This seemed dubious to many since Daniels was not known at the time. TNA didn't exist yet, and Daniels was mostly an indie star with no or little to no name recognition. Bruce Pritchard confirmed that these rumors in Something to Wrestle With in 2021, this was a Vince Russo concept. Now, yes, Vince Russo was still in this company around this time in '99, and this is way before, he does the shoot promo about Hulk Hogan at Bash at the Beach 2000, which, Dark Side of the Ring have covered and all that stuff. Talking about, the damn shit that's in because of bullshit like this, and talking about, that big bull bastard, this is way, way, way before all that. But this is what Bruce Pritchard had to say. We landed on Vince by not having anyone strong enough to be put in that position and bring it back to what worked. What people were comfortable with and what they knew. I think it was an opportunity to introduce someone new and something different. One of the ideas Russo had was, what if it was Christopher Daniels, bro? As much of a Christopher Daniels fan I am, it was hard for me to imagine what he would have been immediately programmed with Austin in '99. Now, I think it would have been crazy, um, because this is Daniels we're talking about, like 1999 Daniels. He still had hair back then. This is not before he becomes Fallen Angel, Christopher Daniels in TNA. Starts to do the prophecy stuff in ROH. In 2000, in 2002. This is way, way, way before that. I think it would have been cool. But let's just kind of keep within the confines of the bubble here. Daniels said he didn't know if he was up for the role until years later when Bruce Pritchard mentioned it on his podcast. Daniels said that he sees why it didn't work out though. He admitted that WCW did something similar in a short time in WCW. Yeah, that's right. I forgot he was in WCW for a little bit before the company died, and AJ Styles too. Where he was supposed to be with Vampiro during this feud with Sting, where they wanted him to be his higher power. Daniels said it was a tough sell to make him Vampiro's boss, and it would have been harder with Undertaker. More recently, in an interview in an episode of Grilling JR with Jim Ross in January 2024, Ross said he hadn't heard that the higher power was originally supposed to be Christopher Daniels. However, while Ross said he didn't hear about it in '99, he also didn't think it would have worked any better than the Vince McMahon option, since Daniels wasn't ready for the big stage and over enough to pull it off. That's, I mean, I kind of commend him for that, because there would have been a lot of people not knowing like who this guy was. There would have been no question. It would have been like, who the hell is this? Um, but I think if they went with Jake the Snake Robert route, a lot of people would have known who Jake was. Let's just say that. A lot of people would have been like, okay, like let's just see if it works. Like whatever. Um, I think if it, like I said, if it was Jake, I think it would have been a better thing. In the long scheme of things. Um, but I think it's just one of those things where it's like it was the wrong place, wrong time for Vince McMahon thing. Because like it's like you completely retconned your whole babyface turn by making yourself the heel again when you were a heel to start off with. Um, but then it's like it's kind of murky waters with the Shane thing and kind of like just that whole shebang, whatever. Um, I think it would have been cool if it like I said, if it was Jake the Snake Roberts. But I think if it was that, I mean, I think it would have been just better off, to be honest with you. And that will do it for tonight's episode. Wow. Okay. Talking about this makes me want to go back in time and just kind of just see like what it was back then. Um, I think like I have a notebook somewhere where it covered the whole Attitude Era, from when it started in '97 to I think like '99, 2000 or something. Um, I mean, yes, like if you want to be technical, it ended in '01 at WrestleMania 17, but it's just like like you gotta like think about it that way too. Like you gotta think about it like in the grand scheme of things, like from '97 to '01, a lot of people were still hooked on the Attitude Era back then, and I think if it lasted from when that higher power thing like to like '01. I think it would have been cool if it was like Jake reconciling with Steve Austin in '01 at the end of that match at Mania against The Rock and all this stuff. Um, I think it would have been kind of cool to see like how it would have worked. Because I mean, both Jake and Austin, they're both talkers. They're both badasses. They could have just made some good magic. I think between them two. Um, I think it would have been actually an interesting dynamic between Jake and Austin back then. Um, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What do you think about this episode? And you know, this Sunday coming up, it is Shoot the Shit number 45. Yes, 45 episodes of Shoot the Shit on this podcast. Good Lord, please help me. Um, that Shoot the Shit episode that's coming up is gonna be hopefully not a long one, but it's gonna be talking about a lot of different things on there. Um, but if you guys like what we do and you want to subscribe to us, please subscribe to us on all social media links in the description below. But you can also subscribe to us on YouTube here. But we will have all of our links to everything that we have in the description down below, which will take you to the Linktree page, will take you to our Instagram pages, Twitter pages, podcast Reddit pages on there. My gaming YouTube channel's on there. Um, and tonight's song of the night, it is going to be a Dolly Parton song. I know we don't usually talk about Dolly Parton very much on this channel. We haven't really talked about that much on the channel. But in the recent aftermath of her passing a few days ago, I want to do a Dolly Parton song, and I think I'm gonna go with Jolene. I don't know if there's a music video for it or not. I guess I could probably tell Marissa about that. And yeah, that's it. And I will see you guys this Sunday for Shoot the Shit. Peace.